Welcome to the Humanergy Leadership Podcast, where we tackle your toughest leadership challenges and share practical tools to help you lead with impact. And the dog barked just in time. Welcome to this episode of the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, David Wheatley, and I'm joined today by Megan Fuciarelli. And Megan's a passionate human who believes that change starts with self. She started her career as a teacher and left the education environment as a school superintendent to launch Us Squared after realizing that the conversations around social justice reform needed to be had in a more deliberate and non-polarizing fashion. Don't we need that just now? Her impactful TEDx talk and worldwide speaking engagements emphasize her approach of swapping guilt, shame, and blame for empathy and understanding. She's also the dedicated parent of Reese, and that barking at the opening was, I believe, Gandhi. Is that right?
Yes, Gandhi it is. And he is not happy right now because he is used to being on my lap, David. And I decided that today's call would be just myself. So.
And it's a good job I've got my headphones on. Otherwise, Olive here would be responding to Gandhi and would be having this dog off going on in the background.
Maybe we need to have a podcast for dogs at some point. We'll get there eventually, right?
Yeah, just barking at each other. So, well, welcome, Megan. We've been circling around each other for a little while, and then recently I had the opportunity to read your book, which we'll come to in a minute. And I think it's very timely and appropriate conversation piece that we're talking about. But I've done the quick bio off the book jacket. What's the additional 30-second bio information that you might share with our listeners?
I mean, honestly, I feel like that really summarizes kind of what I do as far as who I am, because I think that's the most important part of ourselves when we give our bios. I am extremely passionate and dedicated to having those tough conversations. And as a result of that, I have found myself, especially in today's socio-political climate, having more and more of those. And I've actually committed this year to 50 stages in 2025. And those stages are virtual, in-person, podcast, but I am speaking to 50 different audiences because we need to have these tough conversations and we need to keep these conversations going. So I think that's something that just shares a little bit more about who I am and why I do some of the work I do.
Well, I think that's why this felt relevant. Is the more I work with people in different workplaces, when people say, "Hey, we can't talk about politics, we can't talk about this at the moment because it's just off the cards," and I still fundamentally believe that most of the people that we meet we're 90% aligned with, and what we're getting hooked up on is that 10%.
Yeah,
and because that 10% has gone polar. It's making it even more challenging to have the conversation around the 90%.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because oftentimes when we think about the word diversity, we think about the differences, or as you would say, that 10%, right? Instead of talking about how there are similarities and how that 10% can really add more to an organization or add more to a social circle. It would be really boring if our entire workplace was surrounded by people who were just like us, or if our entire social circles were people just like us. That's why people watch TV that doesn't necessarily mimic their own lived experience, because they want to understand other perspectives. But when it comes to real interactions and real humans, we don't always lean into that as much. It's safer behind a computer screen or behind a television screen. And what we want to encourage, and what I personally, as my mission, want to encourage, is for us to have those conversations in real time with real people as much as possible without the guilt and the shame and the blame that you talked about from the book itself.
And I've been saying a lot recently, I think there's two dramatic shortages in America at the moment. One of them is critical thinking and the other is curiosity.
Curiosity, absolutely.
And so curiosity is where I was going to link into what you're here to talk about today, which Metamorphustice, yes, which I can't complain about because I named a company Humanergy. So Metamorphustice. Give us an overview of this wonderful book, Metamorphustice, that's in front of me here.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. So the book itself is actually the first of a series. So there are 7 books in the series. The first one is the introduction, which is the idea of the continuum of metamorphosis. And metamorphosis, like Humanergy, is a juxtaposition of two words. So it's the metamorphosis of justice. So that's where we come up with metamorphosis. And really what it comes from, the word itself, is metamorphosis. A caterpillar can never go back, or a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, but a butterfly can never go back into being a caterpillar. It can create future caterpillars by laying eggs, etc., but it can never revert back. And when we're doing social justice, when we're in that reform, when we're in that transformational stage of social justice, we have to think of ourselves as those butterflies. We can't go back to being caterpillars. We need to keep moving forward. And then we need to lay eggs for the next generation and make sure that we're perpetuating the positive values in alignment to beliefs and the positive attributes of curiosity and conversation and courage. All of those things are critical for us. And the idea of Metamorphustice was to walk people through not just the continuum of social justice, which we've identified 7 stages, but also talking about what it means personally with self-reflection prompts. And I think that was one of the biggest pieces in the book that I've received a lot of feedback on, is there are actually journal prompts embedded within the book. And that's where our name Us Squared comes from. It's understand self, unite society. We have to understand ourselves before we try to work on our organizations or others. And too often as a society, we work on everyone else and we point the finger instead of looking in the mirror, right? So the journal prompts allow the reader to reflect themselves first, and then it moves into the actionable steps that you can take after you've done the self-reflection in your organizations and in society as a whole.
One of my favorite quotes from way back in my college days is the longest journey of them all is the journey inwards. And so that's what you're really pushing, is that whole sense of, okay, we have to keep going in.
Right.
And those 7 steps, when I was reading the book, it's like, okay, there's a bunch of stuff on social justice and Jedi, red eye, depending on which way you look at it, out at the moment. One of the things that surprised me was I got to step 4, which was to be an ally, and there were still 3 more steps to go. So just walk us through those 7 steps and see if we surprise other people.
Yeah, I'll go through them pretty quickly or pretty briefly, just because I could talk for hours on this, right? But the first stage is the idea of being oblivious. So I'll kind of share a story as I go through the 7 stages. And oblivious is a lack of understanding or a lack of knowing. It's one of those things of we don't know what we don't know, right? So I grew up in a very homogenous environment. I did not understand the lived experiences of many other cultures, many other people, because I never had exposure. It wasn't that I had hatred or that I was purposely not learning. It was my education system didn't teach me. Our mass media at the time didn't have representation. And I was isolated in my own bubble of surroundings. So I was oblivious to a lot of different intersectionalities or identities from that. That's that first stage. There's no ill will. It's not a choice to be ignorant. It is you're isolated, you're insular, right? It's often in younger age groups that you find the oblivious category. Mm-hmm. Once you move out of being oblivious, then you go into the defensive stage. And the defensive stage is what we're seeing a lot of in American society right now. And it's where there's an extreme.
No, we're not. Sorry.
Right? Okay, just show your defensiveness, David. Right? But it's that polarization and it's extreme emotion, and it can go on either side. So we have people who are considered, and I don't bring politics into this often because really this is about human rights, human conversation, and human connection. But if we're looking at the politics lens of things, we have people on the far left and people on the far right. Both of those groups on the far sides of either would be considered defensive. And the reason why I say that is because they're pointing the blame and they have extreme emotion, either extreme emotion in the sense of anger or distrust or disbelief, right? Or sometimes it's sadness. They're overcome with grief. But either sides of the spectrum, if it's extreme, then it goes into that category of being defensive. Then the third phase is what we call savior. And we're also seeing quite a few saviors. And I will say that my own journey, I was a savior for a very large chunk of my life. Once I got out of the oblivious stage as a teacher, I wanted to save the world. I wanted to save the children. I wanted all of those things, right? They seem like great ideas. However, if you believe that you can save someone, then inherently you're thinking you're better than them. So that's the third phase. Then we get into the fourth phase of ally, which you were talking about. An ally is someone who has sympathy. They care about other groups, but it's sympathy. So it's feeling sorry for, right? It's scrolling through social media, dropping a care emoji, right? It's sending a care text periodically. That's being an ally. We all need an ally from time to time, but there's more steps beyond that. The fifth phase is advocate, and that is having empathy and understanding. The issue with being an advocate at times is if you are advocating for someone, you're speaking on their behalf and sometimes without their permission, right? And then the sixth phase is something that Ibram Kendi actually really coined a lot of around how to be an anti-racist, but it's the idea of being a co-conspirator. And that is when things happen, it's stepping up to stop that from happening. So it's like being an anti-racist or anti-sexist, right? However, it's still a reactive mechanism. The final phase within Metamorphustice of our 7 phases is the idea of being a change maker. And that is from a reactive or from a proactive stance rather than a reactive stance. So it's consistently looking at the world, whether your own organization, your family, your social circle, but looking at the world through a lens of social justice, inclusion, equity, and diversity. So really being more proactive in how we view things, seeing that something might be an issue before it hurts someone so that we can ensure that everyone is seen, heard, welcomed, and valued.
And that was part of what what impressed me and got me thinking and reading more about this, is because it's like, oh, there's continued room for, we don't stop. This isn't a journey that finishes. It's like life. You come to an end of one day, but the rest of it's all about learning. There's something you said
I
there
am
that
a recovering checkbox person, right? Like I used to write things on my to-do list even after I did them just so that I could check them off, right? So I understand how much of a high it can be to cross things off and to be done with something. But you're absolutely right. This is a true journey and a true transformation that is never really complete because there's always new dimensions and new lived experiences to reflect upon.
So it's something you mentioned that just caught my eye a minute. Is there a fine line between advocate and savior?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So a savior is they want to save. They don't necessarily speak up. They don't try to make change. They just want to save, right? So an example of that would be going to volunteer at an orphanage or adopt a child from another country, but not actually wanting to take steps to make the situation better for them. An advocate might speak up and say, wow, we have more children in this orphanage in this area than anywhere else. Let's find out what the reason is and let's speak up on their behalf to make change.
Right.
So that would be the difference between the two, is a savior just takes it upon themselves to do all of the work, and an advocate brings voice and brings awareness for others to be understanding of what's happening so that maybe they could then step in and support.
I appreciate that subtlety, and all the way through there's some pieces like that, like you say, there's lots of reflection time and reflection prompts to get people thinking about where they're at. And I had the feelings I was going through it. I may be in different places on any given day, and even though you say don't go backwards, sometimes it feels like, oh, I thought I was here, but maybe I'm not quite as far along there as I thought I was.
And the other thing with that, David, is depending on the identity that you're speaking of, right? So, for example, someone might be very much in the changemaker status around sex, around gender, right? Male, female, the binary genders. However, they might be very oblivious to different religions or even gender identity, right? So non-binary genders. You can be in different stages based on identities. Some people are more insulated for a lot of different reasons. There are some religions that do not allow, according to the word, to be able to identify or to be able to accept or relate to some of the identities we speak to. And that is something that we take into account, right? No one is going to be a change maker in all of the areas. And like you said, there are days where I definitely say, oh my gosh, my heart is just hurting. My heart is heavy. I don't have the time to be a true change maker. I'm just going to donate or be a savior right this moment. But it's about that awareness of where I'm at so that I don't stay there too long. Because there's times where we're going to fall back. And there's times where I
Right.
get angry. So I fall into the defensive stage too.
And so in some ways, you're saying there, it's not necessarily a bad thing to recognize, hey, right now I don't have the energy for this. I'm going to send them some money, and that makes me a bit of a savior. But
Absolutely. There's
tomorrow I'm
no,
going to push myself to move further along this continuum.
it's the whole idea of eliminating shame and blame and having the awareness so that you don't fall into a pattern. It's okay to be an ally from time to time. Scroll on social media. You don't have time to have a full conversation, but you want to let that person know that you saw their post and you're thinking about them. Send a care emoji. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just says, right now, I don't have the capacity to call you, whether it's time, effort, energy, whatever it is. But I saw this and I want you to know that at least I saw it and I'm thinking about you.
Which reminds me of a story that 30 years ago, when I got married and we shipped ourselves back to England, and along with a 3.5, 4-year-old, and we were in a corner shop run by a Sikh gentleman just around the corner from where my folks lived.
Mm-hmm.
And our 3.5, 4-year-old said, "Mum, why is that man wearing that hat?" And
Mm-hmm.
my thing culturally, where the way it was like, oh no, don't bring a question like that up. That's not great. And fortunately, I'm married to somebody who's more aware of things like that, and said, I don't know. Why didn't you ask him?
Mm-hmm.
And so he went up and asked, and it was one of the most enlightening conversations about what it means to be a Sikh that I've ever been party to. And it was when you realize that the curiosity of the 4-year-old, that innocent curiosity, it's just interested.
Mm-hmm.
The response was one of being willing to share.
And I
And
love that. And that's something that we talk about quite often. I remember as a child growing up, my parents always told me never to look at someone who was different. Don't draw attention, right? That it's rude. And I remember when someone would either come into a room in a wheelchair or they were using some kind of mobility device, I would be so curious, but I would try so hard not to look because I didn't want to be rude. And my parents taught me because they wanted to be respectful. That's what they were taught,
mm-hmm,
right? We teach
yeah,
what we're taught until we're taught otherwise, right? We
yeah,
don't know what we don't know, but once we know better, we have to do better. And now with my child, I tell him all the time, if you have a question, don't ask me, ask them. And that's something that we lose along the way as adults, right? As adults, we're
yeah,
expected to either Google it or in today's generation, right? Google it, find out the own answer, don't ask questions. But then we'll go to our colleague and ask questions. But
yeah.
that's even more rude. But we don't think like that because we're taught along the way that curiosity is a bad thing.
Would gladly be indirect. So,
Yeah. Curiosity
and
is considered nosiness,
yeah,
but in actuality, it's just curiosity. We need to stop making that out to be a negative thing.
and the humanity language is caring, honest, and direct communication, which is that
Absolutely.
same thing. And just been reading a book called, I think it's Ask by Jeffrey Wetzler, and
Okay.
he addresses the curiosity curve,
Mm.
which is fascinating. People should Google the curiosity curve and find that out, because that builds on that whole idea of we need to be more curious. We need to keep evolving as caterpillars to butterflies.
Love that.
So Megan, this is a leadership podcast aimed at humanities clients. Um, how can leaders take the concepts in your book and use them to build better results? Because after all, that's usually what they're looking for and measured on.
Yeah, the number one thing is awareness, right? It's about understanding your own internal biases, thoughts, ideas around people or groups of people. Because whether we're consciously doing it or not, as leaders, we are communicating with people based on our perception of them. So we're communicating with our clients, we're communicating with our team members, we are communicating with people based on how we see them or how we view them and our perception. And if we have that awareness and the humility to be able to say, maybe that's not accurate, maybe I need to dig deeper into who they actually are and let them tell me how they want to be treated, who they are, how I can best serve them. I believe very strongly in the idea of servant leadership, right? How we can best do some of those pieces. That is the awareness component. The second piece is wisdom, which is the education. And what we mean by that is, as leaders, we need to find those programs, find those opportunities. So many of those Humanergy offers, which is bridging those gaps. Once you identify an awareness, a gap that you have in your own leadership style, finding the education to enhance your wisdom, and then ultimately the idea of empowerment. As leaders, we need to empower our team and empower our clients to step up into the power that they have themselves.
Right.
Just because we're leaders does not mean that we're the only ones that hold power, and we need to be able to empower others to showcase their own skills and skill sets.
And there's research now that will tell you operating that way positively impacts the bottom line.
Absolutely. We actually talk about that. My second book is coming out soon, and we talk about the ROI of DEI and what that ROI really looks like, because with so many things happening in our socio-political climate, people are moving away from it because they're afraid of the backlash.
Yep.
But really, when we lean into it, and we've seen this specifically with companies like Costco, but we've seen this where when they lean in and they look at it being aligned to their values, not just another initiative or another project, but aligned to their values, they see a tremendous impact on their profitability and their productivity and their morale and their employer retention. All of those pieces are positively impacted when we truly see, hear, welcome, and value everyone.
Cool. Well, that's what a good way to wrap that up. So where do people go and find out more about your work, Megan, and the work of Us Squared, and where can they pick up Metamorphustice?
Yeah, so super easy with social media. It's either at Us2 Consulting or at Megan Fuciarelli, which my last name is not easy to spell, but I'm sure it'll be in the link there. But on all of the main platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, we post regularly on all of those. And you can also go to our websites, which is the exact same thing, us2consulting.com or meganfuciarelli.com. And our book is available on Amazon, on Walmart.com, Barnes and Noble,
I try to
Target,
tell people go
all the
order it
main
at your local
platforms.
bookshop first.
I know. So unfortunately, we do have maybe 6 or 7 local bookstores that carry it. But if you email me directly, I can let you know if there's any in your area. And if not, I can let you know where you can order it online, or you can order it directly from our website.
Smashing. And if you're a regular to Humanergy's first Friday work sessions, the first Friday of every month, you may see Megan as somebody familiar, as she's a regular attendee there as well, and jumps in with some great observations. So, Megan, thanks very much for sharing, and thanks very much for spending some time with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, David. Great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thanks. That was the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe and visit humanergy.com for many more resources.